Penn State men's basketball upsets a quality Nebraska team 89-72. And don't look now, but this team could sneak into the Big Ten tournament.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. You are locked on to some Penn State men's basketball. Was this one just long overdue? Penn State looked like the team of old that we kind of assumed that they were going to be. So in this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, looking for your questions, comments in the live chat. Have all of you in the conversation as well. But yes, there is a chance that Penn State could sneak into the Big Ten tournament, and then who knows, maybe they get bounced. But this was a team that is at the bottom of the Big Ten conference. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's easy, but let's talk about that path and then go into the recap of the game itself. So Penn State, believe it or not, does have an outside chance. The season's not over. The season is by no means over. Now, do they need some things to go their way? Absolutely. They're only a game and a half back from being, you just can't be one of the bottom three teams in the Big Ten. The top 15 out of 18 are taken into the Big Ten tournament. And if Penn State can just finish outside of that bottom three, then they are in. Here's where it isn't favorable for them, though. I'm here to argue that they have a chance. I'm not necessarily here to declare that they're going to get into the postseason. But for Penn State, sitting at 4-12 in conference, you don't hold the tiebreakers against Washington. You split with Rutgers. You don't hold the tiebreaker against Iowa, Minnesota, Indiana, USC. So any of those teams, but you pick up a quality win. You get a little bit of a confidence boost here against Nebraska, and who knows what can happen. So it is unlikely, but it is not impossible. And then when you look at Penn State's schedule in itself, okay, if they can beat Nebraska, then that means a win against Minnesota's on the table. A win against Indiana. Now, I know those games are on the road, but those games are now in play. Because I'm sitting here thinking that, okay, coming off of a game against Washington, that's it. It's over. I don't know what else this Penn State team can do. And then Puff Johnson, there's no chance of him coming back. They've essentially shut him down they've shut him down for the season. He is out. He's finished. And everything just looks bleak. But now you have an opportunity to at least make things interesting. Play spoiler. Do whatever you got nothing to lose. You're at the bottom of the Big Ten Conference, so there's nowhere else to go but up. And remember, this team, for what it is worth, does have talented players. Ace Baldwin's been banged up. Puff Johnson's lost for the season. So it's just kind of a matter of figuring things out, and that's what Penn State did in this game. They make some subtle changes that you might not necessarily notice immediately, but having DeMarco Dunn start and have Nick Kern Jr. come off of the bench, that's a big deal. That's a small, subtle change that gives them an impact. Having Kern be a sixth man as opposed to someone that's in the starting lineup, because then it balances out the defense a little bit. Notice how Ace Baldwin didn't play as many minutes. He still played a bunch of minutes, because anything that's over half an hour, anything that's 30 plus minutes, I would say is a bunch. But he didn't play his normal routine of 38, 39, 40 minutes where he plays the entire game. He needs a break. He needs rest. And dude's been worn down, but he's still going out there and giving it his all. Again, quality Nebraska team. I think part of this has to do with matchup. Yannick Konen-Niederhauser had a really good game. So size advantage certainly helped in this case. But Penn State can absolutely put this one in its pocket and use this just as some leverage down the stretch. So it is not a guarantee that they make the Big Ten tournament. I would say that it's unlikely, but there is still a chance. It is tough, though, just because the odds are against them. Now, if it was favorable, I would sit here and say, you know what? Take it to the bank that Penn State men's basketball is going to sneak into the Big Ten tournament and be one of those final seeds. But when you don't hold a lot of these tiebreakers in the standings, it is tough to argue, because then that means a Rutgers team who I think is still... I'm surprised that Rutgers has been as bad as they are this season, or just not as good, I should say, with the dynamic freshman duo that they have. So Once again, John Calipari had some formula where you recruit all of the best freshmen, all the best high school seniors, and as true freshmen, they go out and they become an instant March Madness contender, and Rutgers is falling short of that expectation here. You don't hold the tiebreaker against Iowa, so you're hoping for a lot of things to play in your favor. Penn State certainly doesn't control its own destiny, but do not write them off. We've seen Penn State men's basketball teams get hot at the right time, and maybe it's just here's what I will say. It is not impossible, but it's also not completely unlikely either. It is not favorable, but it is, like I said, an uphill battle. It is a climb, and Penn State needs a lot of things to go its way, but winning down the stretch will certainly take care of that. They just need to jump a couple of teams that they're a game and a half behind. So you need to root for a Rutgers or an Iowa to lose. You do face Minnesota and Indiana, those two teams that are 2.5 games ahead of you. So who knows here? But it's something to be positive about. Penn State certainly was long overdue for a win, and then we'll recap this one in the upcoming segment. Of course, your thoughts are appreciated over in the live chat. So be a part of this conversation. We'll check in on the live chat and go through this Penn State win over Nebraska. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting, wondering, worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation, an expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. And while they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. That is TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. That is TurboTax.com/guarantees. And let's pick back up this conversation with the live chat. Edward, thanks so much for joining the show. This is the Penn State basketball team that I've been waiting to see for quite some time, and this is the team that I knew they could be. I mean, there's a lot to like about this game. If they had done this against Washington, which hindsight's 2020, I think jet lag played a factor in that. If I had to make up something, and that I'm not trying to manufacture an excuse, but what I'm getting at is Penn State does this to Nebraska, but they lose by 2 to Washington. Nebraska is a team that very well should make the field of 68. They're a March Madness team, at least a March Madness. Maybe they're a bubble team. I haven't been fully keeping up with, okay, who's in, who's out, who's the first four, who's the final four in, who's the first four out, that kind of thing. But Penn State, this is a quality Nebraska team at the end of the day, and somebody that I really didn't give them a lot of chances to beat. Well, maybe they have nothing to lose in this case at the end of the day. And that's kind of, I think, where Penn State is at, where they can be a bull in the china shop. Everybody has written them off. Everybody's forgotten about them this season. I've said it myself. This season is washed. This is a team that came in that declared. They said it themselves. Ace Baldwin. Yeah, we think we're a conference championship contending team. We are definitely a March Madness team. Zach Hicks said it. Nick Kern said it. Mike Rhodes said it. We're ready to win now. Well, where's the winning? So this is a step, some sort of step in the right direction, because I'm glad they're not throwing in the towel. They are not giving up. They're still trying to move forward and salvage the season, and that's why the Big Ten tournament is still in play. Top 15. I don't like saying that because there's 15 out of the 18. I can't say top 15 because how do you say you're a top 15 team when in conference right now you're the 15th best team is 5-10 in conference, which is Nebraska. That is not top 15. You're just not one of the last 3. So Penn State just needs to avoid being one of the last 3. And against the likes of Nebraska, I mean, they shot very well. They shot close to 35% from three. Most importantly, they were able to just kind of return to the fundamentals. This is a team that I do not view as an outside shooting team. This is a drive. Maybe you kick it out to Zach Hicks, and they did that. Zach Hicks was 5 of 9 from three-point range. He had 19 points. This was a team that shot 60% from the field, and when you drive to the basket more, which is what all of these players are good at doing. They are good at creating their own shot. They are good at going and creating their own lane. They have the speed to sidestep by anybody. And that's not just Ace Baldwin. That is, Nick Kern is one of the best basketball players at getting to the basket. He really does have a vision to see the lane and get to the hoop. And Freddie DeLeon is like that. So they have all of these players that can do that, but for some reason elected to take all of these outside shots over the course of this losing streak. So they got back to fundamentals. Something else that stands out here, Ace Baldwin got back to his fundamentals. Ace Baldwin does not need to score 20, 30 points on a given night. You have Zach Hicks. You saw that Conan Niederhauser, 19 points. Hicks and Conan Niederhauser both led the way in terms of scoring with 19 apiece. Surprisingly, they didn't finish as the overall leading scorer, but between the two of them, I guess, they had 38 points, and that was good. That was in itself good enough, right? But they can't say that, oh, we had the game's leading scorer. Nope, just the team. And then DeMarco Dunn, but Ace Baldwin. Ace Baldwin gives you 10, but he had 6 steals. And that's something that Ace Baldwin has been lacking. He's always been a step behind. He will play this floating defense where he'll kind of follow the ball handler and then make that move, but then he's been a step behind. And whatever the injury is, if it's a back injury, if it's a lower body injury that we don't know about per se, Ace Baldwin hasn't been 100%, but I got to give him credit, the grit and the toughness to say, well, I'm not going to take a game off unless I absolutely have to. And he hasn't, and that eventually will catch up. So if Baldwin's getting healthy, this team is still competitive. Again, it raises confidence that they can win against the likes of Minnesota. If they can beat Nebraska, then certainly they have good chances against those remaining opponents on the schedule. Like I said, the odds aren't exactly in their favor, and being on the road, if Minnesota and Indiana were at home, a little more confidence. I think it does help that Maryland is at home, but then they go back on the road against a tougher Wisconsin team. We'll see how it all plays out, but be that bull in the china shop. Mess things up. You have nothing to lose at this point. Everybody has written you off, and you've become the bottom feeder of the Big Ten. Edward, appreciate it. We're going to get through all your comments here. As much as Penn State has struggled on the road, I can definitely see this team going into Minneapolis and Bloomington and leaving both games with wins. Minnesota is definitely beatable, and Indiana can be had. And Penn State's faced both of them. So you know the scouting report. There's no question marks. There's no second guessing. You know what you're going to face in these teams. Kern coming off of the bench in a role, I think it fits him perfectly. And that's what Penn State did early on. Kern was the sixth man. I'm still wondering why DeMarco Dunn wasn't used more this season. It's not only about Kern being a player that comes off of the bench, being that designated sixth man. I think that's a big benefit for Penn State, but that's what Penn State wanted to do, where Puff Johnson would be in the starting lineup and then DeMarco Dunn and Kern Jr. would both come off of the bench. So I'm wondering, where was DeMarco Dunn in this equation? That's on coaching. You got to be able to identify that. Now, if he was hurt and we don't know about it, that's understandable. So it's kind of the same thing. Why is Ace Baldwin lost a step when you got done telling us that Ace Baldwin, this was the best version of Ace Baldwin that we've seen, that we will see, and sustains an injury? So unless DeMarco Dunn was dealing with some bumps and bruises, I won't be too critical there. But I do wonder why DeMarco Dunn should have been in the starting lineup all along, especially when Puff Johnson was sidelined. It's safe to call Penn State the most, Edward, again, thanks for all the commentary here. It is safe to call Penn State one of the most unpredictable teams in the Big Ten. With this team on their game, they can beat anybody in the Big Ten, but when they're off their game, they're brutal. Penn State's also demoralized to an extent. They were in a lot of these games. They should have beat Oregon, and I should have, could have, woulda. I understand. But they were in it there against Oregon. They were in it against Indiana the first time around in the Palestra. They were in it. The games that they really should have won: Oregon, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota Part 1, Washington. Did I just rattle off 5 or 6 games? This would be a much different season. We'd have much different conversation. But if you are that good, you win those games. You close out those games. It doesn't help that they're not 100%. Ace Baldwin was the glue that held everything together last season. Everything. Playing 40 plus minutes every single night when Kanye Clary was dismissed from the team. And then the team somehow got better. It's because Ace Baldwin picked up the team and carried them on his back. And this season, literally dealing with a back injury, so he could not do that. So if Ace Baldwin can get healthy, it's a shame that Puff Johnson's ruled out for the remainder of the season because this team is not abysmal. I know the record says otherwise, but they're not a horrific team. But you got to go based on the results. I get that. But we'll finish with this. Penn State beats Nebraska 89-72. They return to fundamentals and just play to their strengths. Ace Baldwin leading the team in assists with 8. Led the team with 6 steals. That's what you want to see. Zach Hicks, Yannick Conan Niederhauser, 19 points apiece. They were able to move the basketball around, play a little bit selfless, and show some more chemistry. Better late than never. You beat a quality Nebraska team, and they are not out of the Big Ten tournament. They have to win their games. They don't control their own destiny. They are going to need some help because the tiebreakers don't play in their favor. But if you think the season's completely over, that this Penn State team has absolutely nothing to play for, that is not the case. They certainly do. And bull in the China shop. Bull in the China shop mentality. Just go disrupt everything and see how it unfolds. See how it all unfolds. That's going to do it for this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for checking out the show. Really appreciate you spending your Wednesday night talking about some Penn State men's basketball here on the podcast. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. We talk about all your favorite Penn State sports teams. Penn State basketball, of course, Penn State football, and Penn State wrestling. It is your team every day, your favorite Penn State teams every day here on Locked On Nittany Lions.